Hello, intrepid students. I am Professor Patti with Social Work 626 Advanced Generalist Practice with Communities. This is week 11, module 10, chapter 9 of Holman, our selected Holman text. So my friend Cassie is here with you today to learn about building the organized effort. So here we are in module 10. This is my week 10 slides. We are talking about chapter 9, mostly of the not required, but definitely check it out in virtual reservable formats or purchase or to use bookstore somewhere. Holman, promoting community change, making it happen in the real world. So our course structure from week to week is based on several of the chapters, not in any particular order from the textbook. So it is an optional reading often throughout it. We are more than halfway through our semester here talking about building the organized effort and taking action strategies and tactics. And I feel like these are the 2 weeks I'm most proud of the way that I have learned these are the parts of community organizing that everyone will tell you they don't really do and they don't really understand, and they just kind of learn from people around them. So I really love asking people, as you'll see in my accompanying podcast, how do you get people to show up to stuff? How do you know when we have these wonderful ideas, how to make this a group project and a community project and not just I thought it would be a good idea and I have enough influence or favors or power and or money to just enact it and tell people to do it? How do I make it an organized effort to apply structured problem-solving strategies to a community identified issue? So Holman has some wonderful insights in chapter 9 that I will go over in detail. These are the main points of the lecture, which I trust you to review. We're going to go through them one by one. The first thing I'm going to do is show you a sample budget. This is not something I had funded. This is something I used as a practice when I was taking a course recently to refresh myself on grant writing skills, because I was hoping to go for a National Endowment of the Humanities grant to fund an educational podcast. And instead I decided to just write it, shoot for the stars, and plan to do it for free, because I've met people who have done that too. So with all kinds of community programs. So this is a podcast that is current. I had a description, a host, a niche, an ideal listener, and then there's just a really basic budget. Expenses are things that you are always going to have business expenses. It costs expenses to live in the world. You pay for your expenses not only with income, but with the assets that you already have. So you should be talking with people who are CFOs, people who are treasurers, people who are accountants of your organization to understand what is the assets, what are the liabilities, and then how do we balance the day-to-day income and expenses. And that's where organizations tend to focus on tightening their belts, but really you want to develop an entire plan for all of the categories to balance out one another towards your specific mission, which in this case, because it's a small budget, is your specific niche and ideal listener. How are you going to market towards that? Well, in a community, you do need to still be doing marketing and fitting in. So what should we consider? People. You should be paying for skilled labor. I pay someone to do my taxes. That is a skill. I pay someone to prepare my chickens. I don't cut them up in the backyard and field dress them and pluck them and do all those things. I pay people for those skills. So in your mission, what are the items that you need to pay people for? So you'll see in here under labor, I paid myself as lead social worker $75 an hour on this prospective budget to work 10 hours a week. I think that's realistic for the kind of development for this kind of project. I would need a co-host. I'd like to reimburse interns. how many of them for how many semesters, and we have a running total. But I also need to pay someone who's an audio engineer to do a lot of editing for me, and that's going to be costly. I would also like $1,500 as an honorarium for my guests, because my budget for people with time and talents includes helping fundraising for the organizations that I am taking away that executive director's time. I am taking away that philanthropist time. So in exchange, we want to support the organizations that are supporting us. So have money available for in-kind donations if you're going to need specialized training and you need to call in a favor. Even if it's somebody who wants to provide in-kind services, they often will, and then we'll take that honorarium and put it towards their organization. So either way, you want to have, you want to be fundraising or planning to pay for people, including their payroll taxes, which will maybe catch you by surprise at the end of year 1, 2, 3, or 5, depending how closely you are working with your bookkeeper and your treasurer and your financial auditors. Communication, postage is expensive, and mailers are a great way to reach people. Be talking with your community development corporation about how they communicate. Do they have a newsletter? How will you be, and how often will you be doing a newsletter? People I know suggest that you maybe start with something quarterly, and you should be like 9 months ahead of the season when you're planning your new newsletters. Even if that doesn't cost postage, that's still going to cost hours per week. So that communication will have maybe a people cost associated with it, and you want to consider that with your people and with your volunteer supplies or volunteer budget, which we'll talk about later. Equipment, you can see on mine, my equipment budget, there's software that CSU has, so I won't need to purchase my own. There's a studio that I could potentially shoot interviews in that would save me a considerable amount of money. So they don't go towards my budget. What will still cost me money for communication materials and supplies, professional software subscriptions, and some hardware accessories. Coffee, OMG. I also put into my budget, that's the wrong budget. I have a pretty extensive travel budget elsewhere that I put on. When you have people driving to and from, transportation costs get pretty high, and you should plan to reimburse people for their travel. You might have a program that people need bus tickets. Bus tickets are often a non-Medicaid, non-food stamp item that can be a pretty significant chunk of people's budget. If you're not going directly to and directly from a medical appointment with 2 days to 2 weeks of notice, paratransit may not be able to take you, and then you're going to need taxi money. What if you're someplace where there are no bus tickets? Planning ahead for all of these things, we want to think ahead of all of the costs that we may have, because maybe we run into somebody in our foundation directory list. Right now, I have this for Senior Services Ohio, seniors in the United States in Ohio. And so these are all of the organizations that donate to places around Cleveland, and maybe the United Way of Guernsey and Noble Counties in Cambridge, Ohio. They give out $15,000 recently. They funded in 2 grants. So maybe they give someone $8,000 and someone $7,000. Maybe United Way has some transportation money in there, and I could ask for $7,000 specifically on transportation. But we want it as a budget item so we can prove and we can think about all the different kinds of searches we would want to put at the top of a foundation search like this. This is a pretty broad one, and it usually gives me a couple hundred people in Ohio, but not all of these regions are regions that I'm working in. But I don't want to get too tight because I'm in a rural area, and then it's not really going to give me a lot for the city of Barnesville or just for Noble County, where if I go regionally, even West Virginia grants sometimes cover my counties because they're the same region. What kind of outside professional services might you need? Consider what kind of legal oversight you would like. I just had to redo my release of consent for recording. Even though it had already been reviewed by an attorney, now the university overviewed it and said, there really needs to be something in here about the long-term copyright ownership. So I need outside professional services, which the university provides in kind. Special or miscellaneous. The Underground Railroad Museum of Flushing, Ohio. We've got really extensive Underground Railroad trails in this state, and the museum relocation will be happening in August of 2026. So we have all kinds of things we're going to be looking for, and we're going to be fundraising for this fundraiser, and we're going to have students coming, we're going to have colleges coming, we're going to have storytellers coming, and so we're going to have a lot of ways to spread the word and do basically email list build up for the Underground Railroad Museum, which is a public resource. It's a public museum. It's privately funded, or I mean, it's a publicly funded, it's a nonprofit, and it's run by volunteers. So this museum that stays open, they don't even charge anyone, will have these wonderful fundraising. Well, we need a budget for special or miscellaneous to be able to pay for the fundraiser. So for example, it's probably going to be about a 15-month series of events culminating in a big 3-week event. And after that, we're going to have a gala. Well, the gala will probably, cost $15,000 and bring in $25,000, but we're going to get to have a lot of fun with all the people who have volunteered and donated all along the way. So as long as it's a net positive, those galas can be very wonderful as a crowning achievement and a way to celebrate with your community with food. So don't be afraid to budget for things like that, even though they may not produce the dollar for dollar income at a big gala. The big win for a gala is that you have gained attention and volunteers along the way, and donations. Don't buy what can be given. If you need someone who already has it, who's looking to get rid of it, I know most of the entertainment by Cassie Caboodle, most of the desks I've ever worked at for nonprofits have been repurposed after Key Bank or Fifth Third Bank redid their corporate offices somewhere, and we get all beautiful new to us furniture. In 2012, non-cash giving made up 39% of all giving, and we've seen within my budget here what a great, I'm at the bottom. Silly Billy. It could be $1,500 a year that the CSU is providing. It's probably providing a lot more than that with my memberships. So this is where you want to spend some time thinking, focusing, planning, and drawing the eye. In 12-step programming, they say that the mind is a magnifying glass, and that whatever we looked at, we expand. This is a cognitive behavioral therapy concept as well, born out of 12-step groups. So when we focus on the problems that we're looking at with our special interest groups, the problems just get bigger and we start to see them everywhere. But when we look at the solution, particularly when you're looking at people who are willing to join you on the journey, people who are already engaging with this population, you're going to find more and more applicable solutions that you can find. So having those partners, you can also provide in-kind donations for one another, which makes your budget look so much more attractive. These resource cards, it's a really good event for if you have a steering committee, if you have a board, if you have an event committee or a task group that's working on something. Just think about who we can ask for resource cards. I'm afraid to open this live in here, but I went through for the Barnesville Depot project I'm working on. It's this far away from me at all times. It's a historic trains depot off the B&O line that's no longer functional as a depot, but does provide a number of community uses. And there is a whole group there that comes together for the committee. Well, those committee things are for that committee, I'm writing grants. And I actually thought, what are the businesses that we could ask to give a gift card for? So in the Barnesville area, the Ohio Valley Mall is about 25 miles away. It's the biggest mall. So I went on the Ohio Valley Mall website and I looked up all of the stores that are in the mall and I wrote them all down. So this is something that's great for a committee like that, is to come into the next committee meeting and say, I have 32 people to call and there's 12 of us. Who is willing to make a couple of phone calls and have, I love when I'm working with volunteers, just a plain old index card of who am I calling? What is my ask? What's in it for them? So if I'm going to the Ohio Valley Mall and I'm going to Coach's, which is a burger place, what's in it for them is we're going to be talking about Coach's and we're going to give this out it'll be one of the prizes on our prize wheel at our Pumpkin Festival booth. So we want to have a very simple something so that our volunteers, our non-professional people can feel comfortable taking the card, filling it out, checking it out, and coming back to the next meeting and saying, yeah, and I have a part of this and I did something. Even if they say no, would we help people feel engaged in the solution? That's very good for individual mental health and community mental health. And in social work, we know when our community gets healthier, the individual gets healthier. This is another activity you can do. You can ask each person in your small group, ask who are 3 of the most important people they're willing to ask for a favor. This one's tough. I have my daily journal, and occasionally I will write one of the names in one of the days that I'm going to go ahead and ask that person. But I try to call 3 to 5 people a day to check in, to see how they're doing, to see if there's anything they need from me, to see if there's anything I need from them, and just to keep up with my network of people. The richest people who I would be willing to ask for money. So we want to think about wealthy people with either philanthropic goals or special interest goals. So I have a family member who had, they talk about this pretty publicly. They had some DNA testing when they were pregnant and thought that they were going to have a child with Down syndrome, and just started to learn everything they could. And they learned about the Special Olympics, and their child was born and happened to not have the disorder that looked like it was expressed in the blood work, and said, you know what? We're very interested in this anyway. Became so motivated that now I'm going to say 30 years later, they're still volunteering with Special Olympics of Ohio, putting on a golf tournament. So that person might not be rich, but that person is one of the most generous people in my family circle. And I would ask him, who gives you money for this? And how do you approach that kind of ask? How do I know what kind of people to ask? So do not be afraid to help out on a golf tournament, to help out on an event and say, I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to be helpful. Everyone there will say, great, welcome aboard. We're the weirdos. We do this kind of stuff all the time. And they're very happy to tell you what to do and how to do it. Non-cash gifts would be something like, can I use your convertible to ride in this parade? Can I use your house for a meet and greet before my next election because I want to meet with such and such a population that's interested? 3 skills or talents you personally can contribute to the cause. For example, I know how to work a table. I will go to your event and I will glad hand people and I will thank them for coming. And I will, try to make connections between possible family members or people who grew up in different neighborhoods. That is one of my superpowers. So I can use that at an event. Other people, that's not their superpower, but their superpower might be data entry at the event and collecting email addresses for the newsletter. Sample budget with in-kind expenses. We have some data here for you to look at. Uh-oh. Wrong math, don't like that. What if I don't know any rich people? We have there are, I think, people who are wealthier than me who do something called a women's giving circle. And if you look it up, there's like so many all over the place. If I look up women's giving circle of Ohio, pretty quickly I come up on the Community Foundation of the Ohio Valley. And they have some very specific things that they would like to fund. The women put their money together and then meet once a year and decide in February who they're going to fund. So maybe you don't have $350,000, but you have $5,000. That may not seem like a whole lot, but when the Women's Giving Circle funds your program for $350,000, it's pretty significant when people chip in. What if you don't know wealthy people? Do you know people who have 20 bucks? There is a great American tradition of women having philanthropic circles. So maybe you have your friends over for a Tupperware party. Maybe you have a Pampered Chef party. Maybe you have a noonday jewelry party or bag party. And at it, everyone brings 20 bucks and everyone talks about their different charity, and maybe people vote, or maybe you put all your charities in a fishbowl and pull it out, and that's who's going to receive it. I know families who do this around the holidays instead of gift giving. So talk about these ways of generating income for your favorite charities, and to think about how we can increase individual donations, because individual donations, if you have 100 people who give you $5 a month, that's a pretty sizable chunk of your budget for most small nonprofits that I know. Thou shalt hit them in their self-interest. I have been a social worker for 25 years. I work with kids 0 to 99. I work in urban, rural, suburban contexts. I've just kind of done it all. And everywhere I go in America and when I travel abroad, I meet people who want to raise their children to have a fair shot at this world. You know, it's a pretty driving self-interest among humanity. So, and people are capable of putting off, delaying gratification to work towards their own self-interest. So talk with people you know, and when you're brainstorming, think about what would they really like to see. So Janet Nolan from the Community Foundation of the Ohio Valley met with me because she feels like it's a part of their mission and they'd really like to, right? But what's in their self-interest is, I would love to do some commercials for their annual giving. So I would like to offer them that, but that's something I may be, selling in the future. Maybe that's a wonderful spot that our organization can do. And there's plenty of nonprofits that do advertising. Ask for what you need. The more personal the ask, the better. Think about the Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Foundation. Who do you know? This only affects people who know people with breasts. So breast cancer only affects people who have mothers, who have sisters, or who have daughters. People who have grandmothers, people who have aunts, or people who have coworkers, right? So it's a very personal ask when they ask you to help save a life. Show how giving is helpful to people. There's so much wonderful data about how good giving is for us. Find some, put up an infographic. Show how specifically the giving is going to benefit the recipient. All of the international hunger relief organizations are pretty good at this. They have some compelling imagery. And remember to close the deal. Don't settle for a someday. Ask for when you can expect a decision by people, even if it's going to be a no. When will I get my no by? The biggest ticket or item when you are not producing something is your staff. That includes for therapy services. That includes a medical massage. The staff, that includes probably if you run a pool as well. Your service is swim lessons. So your biggest ticket item, if you're not producing a tangible good, is your staff. So don't be afraid if that's what your budget reflects. When do you want to use volunteers? When you do not have a pressing deadline that you definitely need everyone to be skillful and show up for. If it's something that's pretty predictable that people can anticipate what they will be doing when they arrive. You don't need to worry about skill level, and you don't have to worry about spending too much of your time training. And if the volunteer worker, it's easy to replace, they can get someone to fill in if they must. Fundraising during difficult times. Difficult times are occurring. Difficult times will continue to occur. I don't know any organization that's fully funded by one stream of income. And most organizations don't want to be funded by one stream of income for exactly the reason that we see when income is cut off. We have seen this predictably from the federal government at the beginning of many years when we have recessions, as Congress will say, we're going to raise the debt ceiling or not raise the debt ceiling or extend this bailout or not extend the bailout, and they just freeze everything. So this is not the first time this has happened, and we continue understanding that we don't live in a crisis. We live long term. So how will our company recover from situations beyond our control that a lot of other people are also going through? Let donors know how you are spending your resources. Make your budgetary information public. Talk about what you are doing. Focus on the common ground. Examine what are the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and threats for your fundraising problems. And I want you to ask yourself if your fundraising problems are related to a lack of communication about need for funds. List the top 50 organizations that would be upset if you went out of business. This is exhaustive, and this is a great group activity. The same way we have the index cards, I went through them all and I just looked at all of them and we came up with a plan of action of how to call. What about organizations that we work with? What if they are upset we go out of business? It's important for us to understand what our product is that we're providing so that we know what to put into our foundation center searches. Mid-range donors will make your budget. The Oscars, I feel like it was the Oscars just happened at the same time as the terrible fires in LA. And they raised something like $93 million during the broadcast, and the majority of the donations were under $10. So that is the bulk of millions and millions of dollars of people saying, yes, I care. And you don't need large amounts. So don't think that you have to be going for, especially if you're going through foundations. Look, many of these amounts funded in this column are $5,000 for two, $4,000 for two. Those donors add up. You don't want to just go to the $1 million donors, because look at this. National Church Residences of Jacksonville, Florida, incorporated in Columbus, Ohio. I don't know if they're going to be funding my senior services. I will ask, but it would be a waste of my time if I missed all of the rest of it going after big fish. Remember, we are looking for long-term partners who want to be at our community events. We want them to be involved in our community surveys. So we don't want people who are just going to bless and release or open the checkbook at tax time. We want people who are going to be engaged in developing community-driven solutions. Okay, so your donor must feel comfort at having participated in the cause. Can you think of any recent media campaigns for money where you gave $5 just to get them through for this crucial deadline, and then you just got an email the next day saying there was still a crucial deadline? We want donors to know that we're addressing the problem. They should anticipate that it's something that we're going to ask for. People anticipate that we're going to be sending out Giving Tuesday campaigns. People anticipate that we're going to talk around Thanksgiving, that we'll talk around, if you're a Christian, I certainly hope you're doing outreach funding during Christmas time. You know, there's seasonal asks that people can anticipate, and how can we ride with our cultural flows. The donor should feel readiness to give based on a conviction that the money will be used to serve the public good for charitable purposes. If you are someone who can't answer what your one mission statement is, this is problematic. People want to know, why should I give to you when I know if I give to this other person, I know what they use it on, right? So if I know if I give money to St. Vincent de Paul, that they are going to get assistance, direct assistance with electricity shutoffs, with rent, with eviction prevention, with healthcare services. I know, and I'm very ready to give because I already know how they use their money. They've demonstrated over time. Are you in an organization that has a demonstrated ability to reach out and solve problems, a demonstrated ability to address the problem? How are you showing that? How are you leveraging that? And if not, how are you building your brand to indicate that you do serve the public good? And people should enjoy it, which is why we do want galas, dang it. Also, one of the most fun events to volunteer at is a gala. Although I have a new rule after I went to grad school, if I'm going to a gala, I really want to wear a dress. I don't want to wear a t-shirt. That's just personal. The 11 questions every donor asks. So these are questions to ask yourself when you're developing a fundraising script, which I have like 2 or 3 that I need to develop right now. I'll get back to you, I promise. These are conversations to have back and forth with another person. If you are wanting to write a grant, I highly recommend that you find a grant writing partner. Somebody that you have a dedicated once a week submission deadline, that no matter what, you're producing something every week, and answers to these questions are a really great start. Common ineffective relationships. So we don't want to be the micromanager. We do want to be aware of what is happening in our organization, but budgets are not a time to prove that you save and scrimp at every single penny, because that demonstrates that your staff are going to be very stressed and you're going to have high turnover. We don't want to be changing our mission to attract funding. A great example I had for this was on diet and menu, and we were providing a lot of different things. But if you're fundraising or you're doing all these asks, all these special asks to do expenses around a clothing room, and really you're trying to prevent homelessness, like the money should go towards a house if you're trying to prevent homelessness. So you need to fish a little better, not expand your mission or do things that are off mission. Time banking is a great way to work with staff, with volunteers. People can commit certain amounts of time or amounts of time to volunteer, amounts of time to do development efforts or to work on local policy initiatives or, you know, fairs, staffing at table places. But this is something that you would have to be really organized about, and a portion of your communication budget would have to go to communicating that you have this time banking available and to managing that communication system. 6 steps to raise money. This is a 2-hour meeting that you should be having with your grant development, with your philanthropy development. And again, I sure hope that the bone gnawing is coming up in the background of this lecture. So this is a topic that I always feel hard to express in a short period of time. There's a lot of resources we have on this in the folders, in the Holman textbook, and I feel like we go over this quite a bit in our grant writing courses. So I will be seeing you guys soon. We are post winter break. We've already got assignments, or I'm sorry, post spring break. So we have assignments 1 and 2 done. And the next thing you're turning in is your assignment 3. So I will be looking for them soon. Thank you and have a fabulous week.